I think it's time we checked out something a little extra special. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're reviewing this 1962 Buick Special Deluxe Wagon. I know, rolls right off the tongue, right? Anyway, look at this thing. Look at the majestic beauty that's in front of us. Wow. So the Buick Special Deluxe Wagon was a line of cars that were the Buick Specials, right? You had the Buick Special Sedan, the two-door, convertible, I believe, and wagon. And so they had different trim models for these, the Deluxe, which is a little bit higher trimmed. You got full carpeting, ooh, right? And you got a V8. And the reason I'm primarily reviewing this car, other than it's a really cool wagon, is under the hood, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So let's look at the body of this thing. I mean, look at that humongous grille, really cool grille. We got the quad headlights, classic, right? We got Buick right on the hood, so you know what's about to run you over. That's always fun. Look at that curved front glass, really nice, really sleek. That two-tone paint job, which is really cool. By the way, the color is not the original color. It is a silver off of, I believe, a VW, a modern one. So don't know what the name of it is, but silver is the color. And then the white is the original color of the vehicle. But I like it, it's cool. Nice little two-tone. See here, and look at the body lines. The sculpted body lines of this thing just flows right to the front of the car. Like a huge arrow. We got the trim bisecting it right through the middle here. Very nice, very classic. You can tell we're right off the 60s here. So we're right in the beginning of the 60s, getting away from the 50s from all the chrome. And we're getting into the jet age, right? Or the rocket age with these. Look at that, the rocket that goes right on the side here. Looks like an arrow that's building and building, tapering back out to this taillight. Very cool. We got some boosters back here. Very nice. We got this back window, and the really cool thing about this back window is electric. At the moment, it's not working. These parts are difficult to find because, of course, they are. But yeah, so this window here would slide back down, for flow-through ventilation. We got the compartment in there. Look at that, the size of the thing. Very cool. And yes, you can fold the front seats down, I believe. Of course, Buick in the back so that you remember what just ran you over. Dual exhaust for the V8. Very nice. I love the way the chrome on the side wraps around into the bumper. That's really nice. It kind of ties the whole thing together. Your fuel door, of course. And I really believe they could have maybe built that into the light or something, but you know what? This wasn't a Cadillac, so don't get too carried away now. It is a 4-door post. So we come in here. Look at that. Now this thing isn't completely restored. You would call this a work in progress, but way better shape than my Barracuda is, I'll tell you that. This thing's so cool. Look at this. Super nice. Wow. Look at that door panel. And of course, ashtrays everywhere because, well, I mean, who didn't smoke in the 60s, honestly? Let's close this up. Oop. There we go. That's solid door right there. Let's go on the side here. On the inside of the vehicle, the nice little futuristic almost layout, or futuristic for the 60s layout. We got nice thin wheel, Buick right in the center there. Your key, your lights, your lighter, of course, and the wiper controls. And that is for the heater. No AC in this thing. That was still optional. And the stereo that, mystery aftermarket stereo. We don't know what it's out of, but stereo nonetheless. Love the little partition on top. Look at that thing. Almost like a shelf, you could put something up there. Really cool, but it ties nicely into the rest of the car. Very, very nice. And of course, front and back bench seats, because this thing could carry, I believe, around 6 people is what the capacity was. Oh yes, and I can't forget Body by Fisher emblem that all of these GM products had. The Body by Fisher was a big thing for GM, and they displayed it right here in the door sill, or the running board. Really nice. And believe it or not, this is actually not that big for an old car. I mean, it is big, but not, oh, here we go, look at that. Special. And yes, this thing is very special. Very, very cool. Very few of these still around, running, driving, and in good condition. My friend who actually let me borrow the car to review it has had it for the last 2 years, and he had the paint job done. And, put a few things in it, just some tender love and care to get this thing to be drivable and actually a serviceable vehicle. This thing, if you really wanted to, you could daily drive it. Sorry, can't speak. And so let me go over a few things about this car that's special. Okay, why is it the Buick Special? Well, this thing had a few things to its name. For one thing, this shares, I guess, a platform, you could say, with the Oldsmobile and Pontiac. Their intermediates have a similar chassis. Obviously, different trims, different engines, things of that nature, but they all kind of shared the same underpinnings, right? The funny thing about that is they were the only 3 GM auto manufacturers who did that. Chevy had their own thing, Cadillac had their own thing, but the 3 in-betweeners, right? What I mean by that is when you had Chevrolet, that was your entry-level auto manufacturer. Then you had Pontiac, which was the performance-oriented stuff. Then you had Oldsmobile, which was performance, but also a little bit of luxury, right? And then you had Buick. And Buick was more on the luxury side of things right before you bought a Cadillac. Cadillac was just the pinnacle. Only outlier to that entire ladder would be the Corvette, which was a Chevy. A lot of people consider Corvette sort of to be on its own thing. But anyway, so that's how truth be told, Buick and Oldsmobile were sort of on the same playing field, if I'm being honest. The idea was that Buick was a little bit more on the luxury and Oldsmobile was a little bit more on the performance. But both Buick and Oldsmobile had performance versions of their vehicles, so I don't know, go figure. Now these things, these portholes here, these are a carryover from the 50s, and I believe even earlier than that, where they put portholes on the hood to dictate what trim level you had of Buick, right? So if you had the 6-cylinder, you had the V8, you had the deluxe model, what did you have? You could tell by the different holes on the side of the fender or the hood. It was a very cool system. If you had the 3, that was your deluxe. If you had 4 on each side, well, that thing had a V8, and it was the greatest of the greatest, Roadmasters. That would be the claim to fame for Buick for a lot of people would be the Roadmaster, the Buick Roadmaster, which is the big, heavy, powerful car, right? And so that's the carryovers, these things right here. And so everybody, the old timers know that these portholes, they're the Buick insignia, right? But the real special part about this car is in the hood. So let's check that. Let's check out what's dwelling underneath there. Okay, so there it is. The big powerhouse that is the 215 engine. That's right. This thing is a V8 that measures 215 cubic inches or 3.5 liters for you metric guys. And, it's a all aluminum V8, which is really, really cool and very interesting for the year because none of the American automakers were making aluminum V8s. Nobody. It's quite a small engine, honestly, physically speaking. It fits in here really, really nicely. You can kind of tell the old aluminum there. It has the gold valve covers that I think are pretty cool. And they also made a V6 version of this, which was interesting. But anyway, let's go to why this is important. Well, this engine was in many different forms. Again, Pontiac, Oldsmobile, and Buick shared similar platforms, and they shared a similar block. Different heads on each engine, but physically speaking, the engines were essentially the same. And they ported them differently. Pontiac wanted more performance, they did that. Oldsmobile wanted a little bit more torque or so they did that. And Buick wanted a bit of both, so they did that, right? And so they custom made these engines to suit their needs. Well, and to differentiate, right? You're buying a Buick, you don't want a Pontiac engine in a Buick, right? Kind of makes sense. Again, Anthony, why is this important? Well, have you guys ever heard of something called the Rover V8? I'm sure you guys in England would. That engine is based off of this, believe it or not. This is the precursor to the Rover V8. In fact, damn near most of what's in here made it into the final production of the version of the Rover V8 used for years in England. In Land Rovers, in the Triumph cars, all of that stuff that had V8s in them were this engine. And this essentially was what powered all of performance Britain for the most part. Maybe Aston Martin had their own thing, but everyone else, this. And yes, I know for you guys who know what the Jensen Interceptor is, that had a Chrysler V8, but that wasn't very common. This was it. You wanted a V8 in Europe? This is what you got. Or a Mercedes, and so on. So, yeah, this thing gave birth to so many sports cars, so many of the time supercars, important cars, all of those engines came from this thing. Isn't that cool? I think that's really cool. And even Buick had a special version of this later on in its sedan model or two-door model. And it was called the Jetfire engine. And that thing was a weird, I wish I could find one so I can review it. So cool. The idea is, you see where this big thing, this air cleaner's at? On top of that, instead of that would be a turbocharger sitting right on top of there. That turbocharger would be obviously linked up to the exhaust. And it would run in such a way where the carburetor would be offset to the side a little bit. Now that's a special carburetor would be running. And that carburetor would be fed with a little bottle that had a alcohol solution, shall we call it. And that alcohol solution would help keep the temperature down in the turbocharger to prevent pre-ignition or detonation. And since that, at the time, was essentially rocket fuel, well, of course, they called that bad boy the Jetfire. It was an interesting little engine, made about all of 200 horsepower. This engine, as it sits right now, is making about 160 horsepower, let's say. But the torque numbers are what's important. 220 out of this thing, which is very, very strong for an engine that's only 3.5 liters. Not bad. And it's old technology too. Now, the other thing that's really interesting about this setup is this is powered by an automatic transmission because, of course, this is a family vehicle. And it's a 2-speed, so it's got a high and a low. That's how these work. The Chevys called them the Power Glides. This is called something else, but essentially the same functionality. You put it in drive and you just go. That's kind of how that was, is the simplicity of it, right? This wasn't meant to be a performance car. So you got in it, you went to the store, you got your groceries, you picked up your kids, and you went home. That's kind of how this functioned. And that's kind of brings me to the point of what this car is essentially the family car, right? Or at the time would have been promoted as the wife's car, right? She stayed home, she took care of the kids, took care of the groceries, she got the necessities, and she came home. This was her car. And that was the idea back then. That's how they promoted them. I'm going to try to find a promotion for you guys, and I'll throw it on the video here, but that is essentially what this is. So, again, this is just an interesting snapshot into history that just no longer exists anymore. This type of vehicle, of course, would be taken over by SUVs in the future, and that's what we have now. The modern SUV is what this used to be. But anyway, you know what? Enough yapping. Let's take this bad boy out for a spin. All right, so driving the Buick Special Deluxe Wagon. I gotta tell you, this thing's really cool. This thing, it's got power, right? It's a V8. It's got really good torque, actually, surprisingly so for something this size. And like I said earlier, this engine only has 220 foot-pounds of torque, and it moves just right along. And again, it's only a 2-speed, so I'm in driving. That's all I got. You can cruise in this all day long. You can throw your buddies in the back. Let's go watch a movie at the drive-in, right at the local drive-in. When's the last time you heard that? That's really awesome. Like I said, this thing's a blast from the past. It's very cool. I'm really glad that I got an opportunity to check this out. And honestly, it's a shame that these have gone out of favor. Like I said earlier about SUVs, that's the new wagon of the day. And it's just not the same. Honestly, personally, I think wagons look a little bit better than SUVs. But, I'm glad that we had them. I'm glad that I'm getting a chance to experience this. And it's really cool. The other thing that I wanted to discuss is, who is this for, right? Well, this is for the family that would have been doing pretty okay. They're not doing great. They're not making bank money. But, the husband's well off. He's kind of been a manager for a little while now. He can buy the car for the wife. The nice car, right? They moved up from where my Plymouth is, the entry level. Oh, no. This is no longer the entry level. This is more like the entry level luxury is what this would be. This is, you're starting to get up there, right? You're building up to your Cadillac, so to speak. So that's what this is. There's way more cool stuff in here than in my Barracuda, just honestly speaking. So the layout's really nice. The seats are a lot nicer. I mean, they're just bent seats, but even these bent seats are nicer than my buckets. Sorry, it's the truth. The other thing that's really cool about this car, how the engine had a longer legacy than the actual car it powered to begin with. These engines were meant for these big American cars. That's what they were experimenting with. They were an experiment at the time. And that little motor, that 215 engine, would go on to spawn all of these different iterations of high performance cars. There's a little known car called the Apollo that was made in the US for Americans in an Italian style that had a Buick V8 in it. A lot of really cool cars out there had Buick V8s, and they all kind of stem from this thing, which I think is really, really cool. Yeah, it handles like a whale that's been decomposing for a couple of days, and the brakes are telegraphs at best. But, I mean, it's so cool. It is so cool. All right, let's head back. Alright guys, so that's going to do it for today. Let me know what you guys thought about the awesome car that we saw today, that Buick Special Deluxe Wagon. That's an incredible name. That's a great name. Anyway, see you guys next time.